Hey, I know I'm starting this early, but honestly, the start time was just an approximate start time. It wasn't really when I was planning to start. So, as I'm listening like around YouTube and I'm hearing what people are saying, there are a lot of things being said, some that I think are valid, some that I think are very dangerous and toxic, but I think they're kind of opening up. I think because it's one thing for R. Kelly or a celebrity or a politician or somebody like that to have um, an open case regarding sexual assault against a minor. It's another thing for somebody like Polight, who is not a celebrity by any means, but on YouTube, we are much closer to content creators on YouTube than we are to people that we could never engage with. I'm sitting here and talking to you guys. You guys can come on a panel and talk to me, right? You can engage with us. You can talk to us in the chat section. That's something we normally wouldn't have that access to people. And so I think Polight, because everybody's had so much access to him, it's opening up conversations and feelings that differ from if it was a distant celebrity or a distant person. Now, with that said, there are many things that I'm finding disturbing. I just want to jump right into it, and I'm going to start with the one that's really pressing on my heart the most. And that is earlier I heard an audio that was essentially talking about how these I heard two audios. So on one audio it was a woman, on the other audio it was a man, both of them black. The woman was saying how um these young girls, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, can have the spirit of Jezebel, and that they will force themselves on men, that they will be highly aggressive in their sexual overtures toward men. Um, and then the second audio was discussing how young girls can fall in love with adult men, be that men that their mothers are in relationships with or just adult men that are in their proximity. And what was interesting to me is these were made sort of as an indictment. And I find this a lot. If you guys are on my members page, not Patreon, because it didn't air there, you know that I recently had a discussion about when a child is violated, people whose minds are not right, the first thing that they do is they try to remove innocence from the child. Removing innocence is essential because once a child is not considered innocent, then violating them does not seem wrong. Most people think, right? Perverts think in their mind, right? That innocence equals I can't touch you. But the minute a child ceases to be innocent, which is why you hear the arguments about, um, well, if they can be convicted as an adult, or children can kill, or if they can commit crimes like an adult, or if they can yell and scream and get in your face and fight like an adult, then I can then have sexual access to them. The idea is that when you remove innocence, then the child becomes culpable in the way that an adult is culpable.
Well,
And
can I interject something for that point? You know, this is found out in the research too. I mean, so when we look at black children, my research stems around black males, and so when we look at them, that innocence that you're talking about, who is the scholar Philippa T. Goff talks about this with implicit bias. And so when you look at the black male and you assume that he's older, right? When they look at Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, they call him like a big monster and stuff like that. When they look at all of these youth, and William Gilliam has excellent research on preschool black boys and the way these teachers looked at them because they were big, black, and boys. that was a threat, right? So they see them like you're conveying less than innocent. And so once that innocent is robbed or assumed that these individuals not to have this right because they're obviously older or they're acting in a mature way. So therefore we could treat them, the kid gloves are off, right? We
Hmm.
could kill them, we could sexually assault them, we could do anything with them because they're robbed of that innocence. And that's such a scary thing because we don't think about this within our babies. I mean, even the way we dress them up sometimes. I see certain, I mean, I post pictures of babies. I love babies, although I'm not trying to have anymore. But if the pictures are too risque, if they're showing a cute little girl and something like too adult, I won't show it. And the same thing for a young brother. I'm like, come on, you can't dress them up like that because they're really, predators that are out there that will prey upon these, you know, appear to be innocent, like, they're just so cute and everything. But there's some sick folk out there. Um, and this robbing of innocence is such a huge thing that we just don't take into consideration. I mean, it has implications, like you alluded to earlier, up into the court. I mean, we get people, young brothers and sisters, getting sentenced as an adult. I mean, how is that going to? I mean, we know that leads to recidivism. I mean, it doesn't help. It doesn't ameliorate them at all. But again, these are the type of things that happen. So I just wanted to interject on that point because it's so true. Oftentimes, I mean, hell, we could go back to Emmett Till. We could go back to um, Stanny,
We could
Smith
go back
Jr.
to that young girl who got punched in her face at the mall by an adult man when she was out with her friends.
I mean, there's several episodes or
Or
examples of these
or
things
we can
happening.
talk about this little girl, this 14-year-old girl who people are using as an example of how a young child can move like a woman, and then because she's maneuvering like a woman, it is then a danger to the man. And I want to
Well,
really
I want to
focus
speak
on
on that.
sexual assault. Well, no, that's what's being said though. And
Yeah,
so I want to focus on that sexual assault and robbing children of thinking that this is a valid argument. I think this is my problem.
no,
Absolutely, positively, there are young girls and boys who will be sexually aggressive with adults. They will dress provocatively. They will attempt to push up on you sexually. They will engage in behavior that is hypersexual. But I'm going to tell you something, and I feel very strongly about this. I don't care if a child comes to you 14, 15, 16, 17, 2 years old. I don't care. If they come to you butt naked begging, it is not their fault. I don't care. You don't get to touch kids because something in them is broken. And for anybody to say anything about a child being broken in that way, other than that is a travesty and it is indicative that something is wrong in that household, it disgusts me. I don't care what a child does. I don't care if they get on their hands and knees. I don't care if they crawl towards you. I don't care if they show up at your door every day. That is not carte blanche. That is not an excuse to touch a child. It should do nothing but break the hearts of adults to see a child in that state. There is nothing sexy about a child who is broken, about a child who has reduced their worth to sexuality and who has had their innocence robbed. There is nothing sexy or attractive or arousing about that. And so it is to me an irrelevant point to talk about how children may behave. All this says is we are failing to protect them. A provocative child is indicative of adults who have not protected and guided a child. It has nothing to do with their innocence, their culpability, or anything. It is indicative of an adult failure. Every provocative child is indicative of an adult's failure. I stand by it. And so I don't know why anybody's even talking about this. What is the point in bringing it up? Okay, so a child can literally rip off their clothes and throw themselves at you. What is your point? That's what I want to know. What's your point?
okay. Let me come in here because the whole Jezebel the whole however someone is dressed and everything. Let me be clear about that. I'm not saying that gives anybody rise or how someone carries themselves and everything. Because at the end of the day, in the beginning of the day, in the middle of the day, we're grown as people. Whether it's a male, we're talking about a male in this case who allegedly done these things, right? But we're grown. We're grown. I mean, I've been in education over 25 years. And so I've never looked at this as Jezebel spirits. Now, little girls try to, be flirty and everything. I squashed that shit right off the bat. Like, listen, you're a little girl. There is nothing you could do for me. And some little girls are, maybe um more mature in areas, right? But still, that's a little girl. And for us to say, use this as an excuse to say, well, some of these girls are really, listen, these things happen to me in middle school frequently. I'm like, listen, no, I squashed that. I'm like, listen,
Wait, hold
talk.
on. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So Omar said girls flirt with me all the time. I'm going to need you to really add something else to that damn sentence right now, or I'm going to block you. I'm going to need you to add something to the end of this sentence to make the sentence make sense. This is the wrong conversation just to be throwing out half a sentence. So, what is the finishing of your sentence? Do you have anything you want to add? You want to add something to the end of that sentence? I want you to think long and hard about this. Would you like to complete your sentence, sir?
So the fact that these things happen and everything, we're the adults. We squash that, whatever is a little puppy love, whatever is little crushes or whatever it is, that we don't have to act upon those things. And if we do, what is that saying about us? And I look at us, listen, we could talk about brothers being vulnerable and all that other stuff, but we're not vulnerable to no little girls. I mean, that's not, I mean, this is some real life Eve Bayou shit. I mean, for real, for real. I mean, and it's just to me, when we're talking about this, because there's such a huge bifurcation, we got the sisters on one end, we got the brothers on one end. Listen, it's alleged, and if he did these things, of course, there should be serious consequences and repercussions. And again, I'll let Irene speak to the mom and everything because again, she's culpable in this or whatever, however it went down. Because as a parent, and I know as the mother that Irene is, she's very vigilant. You know, as a father, as a parent, I was very vigilant of my son. I mean, you just can't listen. I mean, we what we're losing sight here is how do we protect our babies? How do we protect black babies, black boys, black girls in our community? How do we protect them? Because I think everybody's trying to make, you know, we title this Surviving Polight because it's the same situation to me that occurred when they were surviving R. Kelly. And again, I'm not taking thing away for those survivors
Wait,
and
do I
everything.
have mods in the chat? Wait a second. I don't have time for this crap. I do I have mods in the chat? We can block SYSBM. We can block SYSBM. We can block it. It's not the time. You're being an idiot. Do I have mods in the chat? Do I need to go into YouTube myself and block people? Do I need to do that myself or can my mods do their job? This is not the time. This is not the time for your retardation, your stupidity, any of this. But we're going to get to this, making it about black male vulnerability. We're about to talk about that. But don't come up in here spamming my chat. We're discussing how no matter what a child does, no matter how sexual they are, you do not, you do not touch them, period. It doesn't matter how sexual they are. That's what we're talking about. And as far as this passport gang, I already got into your nasty, freaky, pedophilic leader talking about you guys want to grab your passports and go to places where you can sleep with 12 and 13-year-old girls. You better leave. Leave. This is not the place for you. You're not welcome here. I'm not interested in anything you have to say. Go away. All of you SYSBM guys can leave my channel. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in the passport gang who doesn't want to be victimized when they go to places where they can sleep with children. You guys can kick rocks. This is not the place for you. Go over there with those freaky, nasty men and you guys get into a huddle and salivate over your behavior, but don't bring that mess over to my channel. It's not the time today. I'm not open to everybody's opinion today. You'll be quick to get blocked today if you start doing and acting and making comments in my chat that are inappropriate when we're talking about a very serious subject.
This is a very serious subject. And, the protection of our community from predators, regardless of who they are, we need to make sure we're vigilant. And like I said, with the surviving R. Kelly, no offense to the survivors, that were caught up in all of that madness that took place. My thing is, how can we make sure that there's no duplications of these type of things? What can we put in place? Because to me, people are just trying to talk about this, generate money, generate likes, generate whatever it is. They're having conversations, but we're not really trying to come up with something that's going to make sure we put some type of inoculation in place to make sure babies don't go through this. I mean, that should be the most important thing. How can we protect our babies? Period. All this other stuff, the He-Man Woman Hater Club and the She-Man, all whatever side you're on, that I really don't care about that. Right now, the most important thing is, how do we protect babies and make sure these types of situations are few and far in between? To me, that's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. And the peak and the bottom of the understanding of that, the base of that understanding is, it does not matter how sexual a child behaves. It does not matter if that child looks like a whole adult. It does not matter if they are wearing a push-up bra and a mini skirt. It does not matter if they show up butt naked at your door. It does not matter if they are the biggest whore in their school. It does not matter. You do not touch them. Adults should have pity on and concern for children who act in inappropriate ways. For us to talk about a child that acts sexually inappropriate in any light whatsoever, other than pity and concern, means that you are a freak. Only a freak, only a disgusting human being would ever look at a child who is behaving that way. I don't care if they are 16. Only a disgusting person would ever look at a child who is behaving in a hypersexual way and feel anything other than concern. Not arousal, not annoyance, not anger, concern. We should be concerned when we see children acting in inappropriate ways. This does not give you carte blanche to put your penis in them or to open up your legs for them. This does not no longer make them innocent. It does not mean that they cannot be a victim. I don't understand why this is even a topic of conversation. I am disgusted that anybody would even make this a topic of conversation, which kind of makes me want to move into the next thing, because Mr. wants to talk solutions already. But I want to move into the next thing, if you don't mind, which is this other sect of people who admit that it's wrong, but their focus is on men protecting themselves, right? Their focus is on how can men prevent themselves from being in situations where they might get accused of harming somebody's child. And I'm going to let Mr. speak on this, but I want to say this right off top. Now is not, now I believe male vulnerability is a thing. It is an important topic. But you know what? This is not the time. The discussion is not male vulnerability. You sound very insensitive having a discussion about how men are vulnerable to children who are inappropriate. Why? I don't even understand why this is being brought up right now. What in the world, when we are discussing the semen of an adult man being left on a child and her face and her mouth being swollen, what part of that makes you want to talk about how men can protect themselves from being falsely accused for harming a child? Do you think, I'm not saying that's not an important conversation. I'm saying, is now the time? Do you think it's appropriate for us to be talking about male vulnerability right now? I don't know. What do you think, babe? Do you think are men vulnerable, and do you think now is the time for that to be the heart of conversations?
Brothers are vulnerable. I mean, this is something I was trying to get my avatar to actually be Samuel L. Jackson from East Bayou or Mandingo. Um, but to me, what's essential right now is how do we protect, how do we make sure babies are okay? I mean, really, how is this young lady? How is she doing? What about the trauma that she's going through? I mean, how is she going to navigate through all of this? I mean, we don't know what fully happened, but we do know, apparently there were semen and stuff like that, and she had bruises on her lip and everything, and she was apparently inebriated. I mean, are we really concerned about the baby? And again, as an advocate, as a Black male studies scholar and everything, I'm always going to advocate for brothers and their vulnerability. But at the same time, what's essential right here? Essential right here is making sure this young lady is okay. That's the most important thing. And so if you want to, come for brothers by and large, or come for mothers and everything, and by and large, and say she had some culpability and all that stuff too, that's fine. That is fine. But to me, right now, what are we doing to make sure that babies are protected? And again, I keep going back to that because, yes, we could look at situations of brothers being vulnerable. But if we know that vulnerability exists, then we often should put ourselves, and again, I'm not blaming brothers, hear me now, but we are aware of situations and we try not to put ourselves in those situations. Now, when it comes to a young girl coming on to us and everything, we have all the power there. We could simply say, listen, no, maybe you need a mentor, talk to somebody, because as a mentor, I don't put myself in situations with young women, with girls. I say, hey, maybe somebody else should talk to you or something like that. I'm not going to put myself in that situation. I'm just not. And again, that's not to say that you can't, these situations are always avoidable. But I think 99% of the time or 90% of the time, I think that they are. I mean, and if you're not trying to move
So what
in a
he's
certain
saying is,
direction,
if the reports are true that he wanted to take the girl down to get some food, or that he wanted to take the girl to get counseling to counsel her about her relationship with her mother, a responsible man would have never been making such requests. He would not be like, let me take your daughter to a private place to discuss how she can reconcile with you. He would not. He's saying there's male vulnerability, but there's accountability that even if you want to have the conversation about male vulnerability, it should be about how men are accountable in the situation. The accountability factor is missing for me. I just think now is not the time. Now is not the time for you to be talking about how you can avoid getting caught up in a situation like this. Why is the focus on adults at all?
that's
Why,
my
who
point.
cares? Like, the focus should not be on adults. We should immediately be saying, at the end of the day, we do know this child was drunk. At the end of the day, we know she had semen on her person. At the end of the day, these are things we do know. Not even talking about the guilt or innocence of anybody involved. What we do know is one person in this situation is definitely innocent. It is the child. So all conversations about this diverting from how we protect children, what we as parents and adults can do to prevent these situations is irrelevant.
Yeah, it's this is tough for me because I don't usually come in and talk about these things. I think they're counterproductive. Um, but I hope that, the audience and people, again, not doing like we did with Surviving R. Kelly. Because everybody, again, they were survivors, not taking anything away from them, or their experience are horrific and so on and so forth. Their experiences were. Um, and again, that situation was horrible. But again, they weren't talking about how could they prevent these type of things from occurring for other young people. It was just like, okay, here's the situation. And it was just a drag fest. And I'm like, okay, hold people accountable, drag them if you will. But okay, what are we going to do to make sure there's a level of protection? And again, this is the thing that really frustrates me because Black folks will come for each other. I mean, I already seen the meme with, um, Polight's body and R. Kelly 12 play and everything. I mean, of course, the internet is always going to be undefeated, right? But and we can laugh and joke and everything, but when it comes to babies being, assaulted and hurt and everything and abused, that's not a laughing matter. And yeah, it's just for me, you know, we just did something, a couple weeks ago on molestation in the Black community, particularly talking about brothers who've been raped and molested, right? And previously, I did one just the Black community in general. When are we going to get to some ongoing support and resolutions that we could help people and not just dragging this out and smearing each other and making this a he man's woman hater club and sisters against brothers and everything? I just don't, is there merit in brothers being vulnerable? Absolutely.
But now it's
Absolutely.
not the time to discuss it.
But this is not, in my opinion, because the focus should be on this young sister. What
It's just
support does
that
she need?
this is what I recognize is that even in a child being victimized, there are men who are concerned about being victims. And to me, that's a problem. To me, that's a problem. Even in a conversation where a child has been victimized, something has gone wrong there. Something has gone amok. The child is drunk. The child is bruised and puffed up. The child has semen on her. Who cares about men? Who cares about grown men? Who cares about grown women? The only thing that should be the topic of our conversation is children and how no child should ever be in that position. And so it sounds it's concerning for me. It's very concerning for me when when something like this happens and people want to infuse in their conversation protection of men and how men are vulnerable. It's like nobody cares about that right now. That's a great conversation to have. I agree. Men can be vulnerable. Men should move wisely, blah, 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 blah. It's just why 48 hours into us discovering a child was brutalized does the conversation automatically turn to men and how they are vulnerable and how they should position themselves? What does this have to do with protection of children? What is
And
talking about protection of yourself have to do with protecting children? And that is my second thing I've really had beef with. The first thing is talking about how children can be sexual. The second thing is talking about male vulnerability. This is not the time. This is not the time. Pick a different time to discuss it.
well, here's the thing that I have with talking about, Black men vulnerability, because it definitely exists. And it's something that I discuss all the time. But if you're not discussing it, all the time, if you're bringing it up now it becomes a deflection, right?
Right,
And then it
exactly.
becomes a situation now that you're now it's watering it down. It's like you're crying wolf. And so the seriousness and its real seriousness and implications behind Black male vulnerability, the fact that you're bringing up in this situation, it doesn't really give it the credibility that it deserves. Because right here, the focus should be on the child, period. Period. And the focus is not being placed on the child. And that's unfortunate. And again, I see people talking about, oh, men do this. And listen, it happens. I don't know if you understand bidirectionality. Men do it, women do it. It's unfortunate. People in our community do it. They're predators. And we just need to address the predators. There's sisters that do it, or we shouldn't call them sisters. They're Black women that do it. They're Black men that do it. What are we going to focus on the babies and making sure that it doesn't become a thing that is, it start to be repeated over and over again, where they have been victims and now they may start to have a proclivity towards these types of actions and everything? When are we going to get to trying to get to the root of it and help support these survivors of these types of assaults?
I
And
mean, I
again,
want to say too, people are saying, the mom, the first report, Polight, he gave that report. And in the second report, the mom was like, she never lets her child out of her sight. And he convinced her to, take the child downstairs for food. Let me tell you something. I don't believe it. I don't believe what the mother said. I don't believe. I know everybody was so relieved to hear that she always keeps her eye on her baby and he just convinced her to let, him take her daughter to the lobby to get some food. I don't believe it. I'm not buying it. That child did not get drunk with semen on her in any amount of time that a regular mother would not have been blowing his phone up and called the police by then, first and foremost. And if you are hyper vigilant, if she's all hyper vigilant, like she says, as a hyper vigilant woman, I'm going to tell you, it would have taken more than a year of bumping and grinding for her to let her daughter walk off anywhere with that man. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. I don't believe it. I don't. I don't have sympathy for near adult in this situation, not the father of that little girl, who we're not even talking about her father. Where's the dad? Where's the dad at? He has no words. He has nothing to say. He has nothing to add. He does not have a voice. He does not have a name. We don't hear him mentioned at all. I don't feel sad for the father of that girl. I don't feel sad for the mother of that girl. I don't feel bad for Polight. I only feel bad for that child. I could care less about any adult in this situation because no adult in this situation cared about that child. Had they, it would not have been all this. Look, for him to even think that he could, right? Allegedly, right? Take a child, get them drunk, bring them back intoxicated, and that was going to fly, lets me know she's nothing like what she claims to be. Absolutely nothing. If you knew somebody's mom was off the chain, highly protective, you would not attempt to do all that. I'm not buying it. You guys can buy it if you want because it makes you feel good to hear that woman was hyper vigilant. I don't buy it. I think it's a lie. I think it's BS. I don't think it's true at all. It's a lie. It's a lie. It's a lie. I'm sure if there's one thing I'm positive about this situation is there's a whole lot of lying adults. And this
well,
brings me, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think there's a whole lot of lying adults. I'm just trying to make sense of. So I think he was trying to be mediator or something, and wanted to talk to her alone
Well,
about
that's what he says. And
allegedly.
the mom says that he was just going downstairs to the lobby with her of the hotel to get some food. And
Okay.
instead he took off with her daughter. So these are two conflicting stories, but they both don't make sense to me. It all sounds like a lie to me.
Yeah, it also. I mean, first, I mean, again, there's enough blame to go around. Definitely with the adults. I would say this, and this is not me caping for the dad and everything. I know what type of father I am. Um, we do know this, and again, sister's gonna get upset with it. It's just the reality. We know some
No,
people play the
no,
pawn game.
no. If he's
That's true.
so detached, I don't care what she did. Don't do it. If
No,
she's so detached, if the father of that child is so detached that he didn't know who the mom was dating, that he is not aware that his daughter has been molested and has not said anything, not busted a move, not done anything. We don't even know his name. I mean, we know her business, we know the child's business, we know Polight's business. Then I don't care what the mother was doing. He dropped the ball.
yeah, you could say that, but if there's not, again, this is a situation we know that happens where there's not that relationship because of the courts get involved or whatever the situation is. Again, we don't know. Again, I'm not saying that he shouldn't have been involved, but we don't know to the extent the reason why he wasn't involved. I
But we
mean,
know
that's
that he wasn't, which is a failure as a father.
well, we
It's
don't
a
really.
failure. It's a failure. It's a failure. I really stand by it. You're a failure as a father if you're not involved with your child. Because I'm going to tell you something. Men who want involvement with their child, they become crazy. They'll have you up in court. Absolutely not. You're a failure as a father if you are not involved with your child. Because I'm going to tell you something right now. Let somebody try to take one of my kids. I'm not going to be up here talking about somebody kept me from my own kids. That won't happen for me, and I'm a woman. So I'm not going to accept any excuses for a man. I'm just not. Clearly, there was not a man involved. There was not an active father involved, because if there was, I guarantee you he wouldn't have tried to take that little girl anywhere. I guarantee you that little girl wouldn't be at a hospital getting a rape kit done had a father been in the picture, an active father, because the only thing that keeps men who are perverts in check, and we know the jury is out on Polight. We don't know if he's guilty, innocent. I'm just talking about in general, y'all. The only thing that keeps a pervert in check is a man who will yoke him. That is what keeps perverts in check. A man who will yoke you. A man who will smash your face into the cement. That is what keeps perverts in check. And so that is why it's so important that fathers be active and not take no for an answer. You better get in where you fit in and raise your kids, because you are ultimately going to be the final check and balance to make sure that somebody keeps their hands off your child. So I don't feel sorry for the dad, the mom, Polight. I say screw every adult that was a part of that situation. I don't feel bad for any of them. They are all guilty in my eyes. All of them are guilty in my mind. And I want to talk about too, like the idea of, let's talk about Polight and the fact that we don't know he's guilty, because that's something that people are bringing up too. And this is an important conversation for me. Polight, we do not know that he is guilty. And I understand men not wanting to immediately run and talk about guilt, 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 because we know that people can be falsely accused. And men understand that if they automatically crucify Polight, then their time may come where somebody could be lying on them and they're going to get crucified. So men want to go really lightly about this. But I want to say this, and I'm interested what you think of this, mister. It's okay if you don't want to indict him as a guilty person. But what should definitely happen is you should definitely say, I don't know if he did it, but if he did, it's a problem. And if you're doing it, it's a problem. And we cannot be doing this. And this is not okay. Like, that's the only way the conversation should go. If you don't want to indict him, it should be that way. If you don't want to indict him as a person, because we recognize we don't want somebody just to be able to say something happened and everybody automatically believe it, what you definitely should call out and make it very clear is, while you won't crucify Polight in this moment, what he is accused of doing is reprehensible. And I think not enough people are willing to do that. I think men are so worried to seem like they're crucifying him because they recognize they could be on the chopping block next, which I said in my other video is what happened to Hassan. He was over on Tasha K's. Hassan Campbell was over on Tasha K's, co-signing Tasha K, talking about how what Polight did was wrong, or what he allegedly did was wrong. And in the chat, women were ready to crucify him too. And he's unproblematic. People were talking about pull Hassan Campbell's card. So I can understand men wanting to exercise caution. But here's the thing. You may want to exercise caution about saying Polight is guilty, but what we won't be exercising caution about is saying that this behavior will get you yoked. I think that should be clear. I think that should be okay. So we don't know he's guilty, but guess what? We may yoke anybody who does this. You may not be able to walk the street freely. He better hope he's not guilty. I hope for his sake he's not guilty. I mean, that's what the energy I'm wanting to hear from men in social media. But what do you think about that, babe? Like towing the line between crucifying a man without being sure he did it, and being willing to say that unequivocally that behavior is problematic.
Well, this is what
What
I was trying to say about the father. So I agree with your statement. This is what I was trying to say about the father. We don't know, and again, that's not lambasting the mom or anything. It gets complicated. So you could say yes, he could have been there, but we don't know. And the same thing with the allegations on Polight and everything. But yes, absolutely. I mean, this looks foul. This looks effed up. And so, yes, there needs to be some consequences and repercussions, definitely, if this is true. And we need to set a precedent like, listen, we're not going for this. When it comes to our babies, they need to be protected, period, regardless of who it is. And again, I think we just get caught up in like, who's doing it and who's not doing it. It's being done. Let's address the issue. And so, again, of course, there has to be due process and everything. So let that play out and everything. But it doesn't look good. And I could say that, as a brother, as a brother that's unapologetic about supporting brothers, about supporting Black people, about supporting us. But it doesn't look good. And if he is found to be, guilty of these things, absolutely he should be yoked up. There should be consequences for his act or alleged act. So absolutely. I mean, like I said, I view the same way with the father, because again, we need to make sure we know, you know, all
I
of
think that's
the
different. I think accusing somebody of a crime and somebody not raising their kid are totally different.
well, again, but we
Like
don't
you
know
might not
all of
be,
it.
you might be not guilty of a crime, but if you're not raising your kid, you're just not raising your kid. There's not an excuse or a reason or anything that can be given. Unless somebody, you know what I mean, has restraining orders out against you and all this stuff because of a situation and you literally legally cannot go anywhere near your kid, there's no reason that you should not be involved in
Listen,
your child's life.
we know people do some trifling things. Let's not be, naive and think that these things don't
But we know
happen.
that the average man does not have the law not allowing him to see his child.
I mean,
So we're
but we
not, I mean,
but
I'm just not
we
willing to
but
give
again,
any space for that.
we're talking about this particular case. So
And I'm
again, we
saying
don't
because it
know.
happens so rarely that legally somebody cannot see their child, then there's no reason for us to presume that that's the case in this situation.
But again, if we're gonna do, do due process and everything, I think we need to do the same thing for both cases. I don't think we can just come for him and say
Are we going
he
to give
needs
the
to
mother,
be.
are we going to give the mother the benefit of the doubt too?
And the mother had she it seemed like she had custodial custody.
But we don't
So
know that. We don't know that. For all we know, the father had it and the child was just visiting.
well, but if she was under her, you know, if the mom was there and she
But see,
was,
this is what I'm saying. This is why I don't give the benefit of the doubt. I don't have, me personally, I don't have time, nor do I care to try to figure out why people aren't parenting. This is just me personally. I don't have time to do that because at the end of the day, if something happens with your child, you're accountable
absolutely,
just
absolutely.
across the board. And so that's why I don't think it really matters. The situation doesn't matter to me because if something happens with your child, you are responsible. Fathers, mothers, you're responsible when something happens to your child. I know a lot of parents are running around here trying to act like I was such a great parent. I don't know what happened with my son or my daughter. They just started being this horrible person. I don't know. Like, I'm so diligent. It's like, no, when something happens with your kid, it's because you dropped the ball. And as parents, we need to stop owning that and always trying to feel good about ourselves. We don't want to feel like bad parents. So we want to act like our kids are independent creatures that are just running around, yes, capable of making their own decisions, but that their decisions are not reflective of our parenting. And it's like, no, the decisions and the situations your children end up in are reflective of both parents. Being absent does not absolve you. Being present and not being on your job does not absolve you. Like both parents need to be present, protective, and active.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's how it should be, whether you're with you know, the other partner or not. You should be actively involved. But again, we know that's not the case for whatever reasons. I mean, there's a bevy reason that could be the case. But that's my standpoint on that. I mean, I agree as a active father, yes, but I do know sometimes there's situation, everything. You might think that's an excuse. And it definitely could go either way, you know. So this is unfortunate because I think when these types of situations occur, we're not centering the child. We're not looking at what's best for the children. We get caught up in our feelings like Drake, well, they did this, they did that, and everything, or he's with somebody else, or she's with somebody. And what about the child that you all created?
Schifrin said, maybe I'm biased, but when it comes to the M word, he's guilty until proven innocent. I'm not debating that. Obviously, we can't say that he's guilty in this moment. We don't know. But people not wanting to say that he's guilty has nothing to do. You can say, because here, the conversation is bigger than him at this point, because we know these sorts of things go on. So at this point, you can easily say, if you have a platform, I don't know this man is guilty, but I do know something. People need to keep their hands off of 14-year-olds. At the end of the day, it's beyond him. It's about the fact that we need to be clear touching children is never okay. We need to be clear no child should ever be in this position. See how easily I did that? See how easily I managed to say that the man, we don't know that he's guilty, but I also managed to assert that touching children is problematic. That is all that I personally am asking. I'm asking because the stuff that I've seen around YouTube is very questionable. There is a way to be very hard lined about molesting children, and there is a way to do that and not indict Polight if that's what you don't want to do. But the movements, little weird, funny, squiggly movements I've been seeing on YouTube, you would think like they're like people don't understand how the two things can match. They don't understand how they can go hard about this topic. Because what we do know is a child was drunk, had semen on her, and a bruised up face. We do know that, right? Let's talk about what we do know. We do know that. And at the very least, we can address that. That is all that I'm asking from people. What did we talk about? We've talked about,
I think
so
we
did we
yeah.
cover everything?
I told you it was going to happen organically. So,
But we
being
didn't talk about solutions.
yeah, I mean, just hard solutions. So, yeah, targeted children. What are the vulnerabilities of men? Protection of children. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, the fact that we're grown as men and these type of things happen, you know, all the time. But again, if you act on them, that's the problem is with you. And like you said earlier, we should be trying to, give these young sisters some help. And again, I always exclude myself. I say, hey, she moving a little bit recklessly. Another sister, can you talk to her? Because again, this is how you try to avoid yourself from being in. You're already aware that she's moving that way. So why would I put myself in a further perilous position and just going to counsel her one to one, like and nobody else is around? You know what I
Well,
mean?
I
Why
think you
would
had it right where you send a woman to her.
absolutely,
Or if it's a
absolutely,
boy, you can send a man to them because it can happen to boys too. So I
yeah,
agree with that. If you see a young woman who is moving in a sexual way, just dealing with people who are saying that, right? Because we know that it does happen. We know that some of these girls, they're very sexualized, very young. If you are a man and you see that, that's not your opportunity to have sex with a child, okay? If you are a woman, that's not your opportunity to be a cougar. It's your opportunity to find somebody who is the same gender as that child. Find that child's parent. If they are responsible, find somebody that's the same gender of that child and have them deal with that person. Because for me, it's not even when I see a child moving funny, I don't even feel like I need to be protected. My only concern is that child. Me personally, I'm very disturbed when I see children acting sexually. The first thing I think is that somebody is abusing them. I'm not going to lie. The first thing that comes to my mind when a child is acting sexual is nothing to do with me, nothing to do with my vulnerability. The first thing I get concerned about is I start red flagging and I'm like, is somebody hurting this child? That's the first thing that comes to my mind. And the first question out of my mouth is going to be, and has been in my real life, the first question that comes out of my mouth is, has anybody touched you? Has anybody been showing you any movies or anything? I start asking questions because I don't even care that you're acting sexual for the sake of you being sexual. I care because sexuality of that degree in children is indicative of a problem. And that problem comes from exposure, whether that exposure be visual, whether that be molestation, whatever. So for me, I've never been in a situation where a child is being sexual. And my first concern is, how can I ensure that I'm not in a compromising position? Now, I am a woman, I'm not a man. So a man may have to think about that. right? But as a woman, and I would even say for men, maybe that's a different take that you can have on it, because that can shut a situation down right there when you start to question them as a child. Is there an adult touching you? Has somebody exposed you to something visually that makes you think this is okay?
Well, let me share
Right?
this.
And then
Let me.
go get somebody of the same sex and let them, and let them and get that child some help. My goodness.
Yeah, that's always been my go-to is, even talking about like dress code or something like that. I've always said, hey, can you address this and everything? Because as men, especially men and educators, you kind of like, what are you doing looking? You know what I mean? So I'm like, I see you moving that way and I feel uncomfortable. So you've got to protect
Mm,
yourself and you have to make sure you do it through another female. And again, here's the other part of that. That female has to know that you're not a freak. Know that you're not a pervert. They have to know and trust, like, okay, they can't come at you like, well, why are you looking at that? You know what I mean? They have to know, like, oh, you're doing what's in the best interest of this young person.
yeah. We as
Now,
women, we do have to be open to men coming to us and being like, "Hey, can you deal with this child?" And us not feeling funny about it. Men have to be able to come to us and say, I have a concern about a child, and us be receptive to that and want to help them. Can we address what Jessica Wise said? Because I think this is valid, because this happened with Kavanaugh, didn't it? Um, this discourse wouldn't happen in the white community. Even white women are believed without DNA. But a black child, we all have these questions. I think that is extremely valid. That's why I said, for me, it's the DNA for me. It's the semen on a child for me. That part, the drunkenness, the inebriation of a child and semen on a child, this is hard for me personally to get past. I agree. But I agree, we wouldn't even be talking about whether he's guilty or not. In the white community, we've seen people just an accusation with no evidence. Stuff that happened 15, 25 years ago, and a person's whole career will be ruined. But in the black
absolutely.
community, we have a child who had a rape, who went to a hospital, had semen on them, had a bruised up fat mouth, and was inebriated, and it's still a question. I absolutely agree with you, Jessica. It would never happen in the white community. It wouldn't. He would have been lynched by now. He wouldn't be walking around on the IG Live doing anything.
So when I had this one sixth grader, um, and I guess she thought back then that she was trying to get OnlyFans or anything. It came out. So I had her first period and I heard rumblings of it because she was going around telling people that she's a porn star. Now, she didn't say it too much in my class, but I heard some, like when she went to the next period and everything, I heard more about it. And, the female teacher and the directors, they came to me like, oh, we got to have a meeting. And I guess she was like on her bed and filming herself with, I don't know. Yeah, I never saw it. But it's obviously it was problematic. And so the directors, I was there. Her parents were older. Doesn't mean that that's an issue, but they were older. They were like grandparent fathers, grandparent parents. And the way they dealt with it was like, she was like aggressive with them, like, I'm just doing this and everything. It's nothing wrong with it. And I'm thinking like black mom, black dad, they gonna come in there. It's gonna be an issue, especially the dad. I thought he was gonna come in there like, what? Oh no. And they were just really passive and everything. And they were like, okay, we're gonna deal with this. And I don't know if they're just put on the front in front of us. I know the black parents I usually deal with, they deal with it a different type of way. It's gonna
I
be a
think if a child
situation.
is doing all that, then their parents are really dropping the ball. I think
It
if a child is doing all that, that means the parents are not doing their job. Y'all, I'm telling you, when I say I blame parents, I blame parents. Y'all will not get me. I'm not saying children cannot be held accountable for their actions, but especially in cases of sexuality, I blame parents, right? I blame the parents. I blame the parents. When it comes to sex, I always blame the adults. The child has no culpability. When it's not dealing with sex, though, I I also blame the parents, right? But I think when it comes to sexual things, adults have culpability for children. Children cannot have culpability in sex. I don't care that kids can kill people. I don't care that kids can be tried as an adult. I don't care that kids can get in your face and punch you. I don't care what these kids can do out here. They can never be culpable in a situation that involves an adult and a sexual act. They can never have any level of responsibility. I blame the parents. I mean, I definitely had, a couple of instances with my students where the girls were using provocative pictures of themselves. And I went to the parents, or maybe they were sharing their screen with me and I saw that they were on websites, like, how they'll have different tabs open that were inappropriate. I went to the parents, but I think as far as protection of children goes, women have to be open to letting men come to them if a child needs help and us not look at him weird, right? We have to have a defensive way to deal with children. When we see they're being sexual, we should, I mean, the Black community loves sexualization of children. We see little girls in half tops,
Yes,
cold
yes.
shoulder shirts,
And
all this
and and
stuff.
young boy. Yeah,
And we
yeah.
think that it's cute and we think it's adorable. When she could do the dance like Beyonce, we think that's cute, right? We encourage sexuality in them. Same thing with the little boys. We think it's cute, right? We think
And that's what I was
hyperse-
trying to say earlier, but I wasn't trying to say that's invitation for predators to come on them. That's not an excuse. But these are the things that are, unfortunately pervasive within our community.
But
So
we have to shut that down. On one breath, you can't be saying that's cute, and then the other breath, be talking about predators. What are you putting your clothes in that and your children in those clothes for? Now I know people say clothes don't determine sexual abuse, but like I said, you've never seen a porno with a woman wearing a burqa through the whole porno for a reason. Playboy's not showing women fully covered head to toe for a reason. So for us to act like there's not a connection between us sexualizing our children visually and the promotion of this degenerate behavior in our community, there is a connection. We
this,
make children sexual objects from a very young age. And
Irene,
and
this is
we
what I want to do. I'm sorry to cut you off. This is what I want to do because I'm looking at some of the chat and everything. I see, hope I'm not mispronouncing her name, Ivana Goddess. I want to address what she said because there's a framework around that. But and again, this is your show and everything. With all due
No, I
respect,
want to talk about her comment too. That's why I have it
um,
here.
but I also I think and I'm seeing some of the horrible people are coming forward with some of their own survivor stories and everything like that. And it's kind of cathartic, I know, but it's kind of difficult to share these things. I wonder if we could be part of the solution, right? And maybe, monthly and everything, depending upon your celebrity status and everything. If we could provide
I
a
do not
space,
have a celebrity stylist.
and we could provide a space for survivors and that we could, again, I'm not a therapist or anything like that. Um, but maybe we could have some on or just and help our babies and help people who have gone through this. I don't know. That just came to my brain because we want to be part of the solution. This I don't want this to just be a one-off, and I say that because when we talked about molestation and my organization and my institution and everything, I wanted to make sure there's an ongoing space for these conversations and resources to be had for people going forward. Because again, what we often do, we'll have these conversations, because it's the hot button topic right now, but we don't, it won't be like over 100 people in here talking about issues of how can we come to some resolution and support and resources and help people move forward with their lives and prevent this from happening to our babies. I hope we have that same energy when we're talking about that. And so that's what I wanted to say. But
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to Ivana Goddess, which she stated,
Yeah.
and
You
so
guys, you guys have to understand in the community, we are taught not to tell. This happened to me, and when I told my dad, he told me not to tell my mom. I eventually told her, but it was never exposed.
so this is I don't agree with all of this professor. Her name is Jennifer Gomez. She's out of Wayne State. So she coined this theory called cultural portrayal trauma theory. So the general idea of cultural portrayal trauma theory is that some minorities develop what she calls intercultural trust, love, loyalty, attachment, connection, responsibility, and solidarity with each other to protect themselves from a hostile society. Within group violence, such as black perpetrator harming a black victim, is a violation of this intercultural trust. This violation is called cultural betrayal. So, intercultural pressure is another outcome of cultural betrayal trauma. With the intercultural pressure, people who experience cultural betrayal trauma are often demanded, this is going to the sister's point, often demanded to protect the perpetrators and the minority group as a whole at all costs, even above their own well-being, with the mandate of don't betray your race, or in her case, don't betray your family, right? Intercultural pressure punishes people who speak about the cultural betrayal trauma that they have endured. And that's what the sister was talking about. And this is like a real,
Well,
like I said,
let's go back over that again because you read a whole bunch of stuff. But just to simplify this, it's
yes,
ultimately what we talk about in a lot of female spaces. Now, Mr. won't want this to be sex specific, but I'm just going to repeat what we say in female spaces, which is that, and we know that sin calls it black male worship, but it's that, for example, we feel the need to protect, right? We feel the need to protect the black men in our community, and because of that, when something is wrong, we don't want to call the police. We don't want to bring that attention to our community. We don't want to bring that attention to our families. So everybody knows, but nobody says anything, and it becomes an enabling environment for abuse. What this woman is saying is that in communities where there is a lot of trauma, a lot of racial trauma, and where the perception of the race is valued in the community, victims are encouraged not to speak because speaking out will cast a shadow over the community. We've actually had these conversations from without bringing in the research, but people do research this. And Mr. was speaking on a woman's research who is essentially discussing the same thing that we regularly discuss in a more casual way in these spaces. But go ahead. I wanted to break it down just,
no,
because
no, no, absolutely. That's it. I mean, and again, we look at situations where, if we look at the the Clarence Thomas situation, and people talk about, oh, the sister shouldn't have said anything because he's going to be in the Supreme Court, and so we really have these real life experiences within, whether it's within our our racial, I mean, as a race situation, or within our family. I saw somebody said
and
that they,
yeah, and Yvonne, that was her situation, which is she was harmed and
yeah,
then she was told to keep that a secret, which is horrific. That's a horrific thing to have to carry around. Um, it's unfortunate. And
but
I
so
know of a
many
lot of
people have to deal
situations
with
that are
that.
similar to that.
Yeah, so many people have to deal with that because they don't want to expose the ugly things that are, that have happened, or in some cases still happening in the family. And it's just like, we're just going to keep that under wraps. And the trauma that you have to undergo. And then, it leaves you open to other types of, predators and everything, because it's just a situation, people who pray, Prey, not Pray, they know, you know what I mean? They know, because they know who to seek out. They know the type of people to do these type of harms to. I mean, they could just smell it out like, oh yeah, that person right there, because this is what they've been doing. But again, I really appreciate, the brothers and sisters in the chat who've been, been cathartic and sharing their, survivor experience and everything. It's not an easy thing to do. Again, that's why, maybe off air, Irene and I would try to make sure Oh, she left. Hopefully she'll come back. um
No, yeah, I lost my sound.
I have a place where, we could be more of a solution than just talking
Yeah,
to
I
the.
want to kind of go over what solutions we provided so far too, because I don't want to lose sight of the fact that that's what we're doing. Because we talked about all of the things leading up to this, but I want to talk about the solutions we've covered. So number one, it's recognizing that sexual behavior in children is number one, not a reason for you to abuse them, but it is a reason for us to it should raise a red flag of concern in us that something is wrong in their environment that we need to address. And at that point, we need to start getting other adults involved, specifically adults that are the same sex as a child, to help figure out what's going on with that child so that if we need to remove people from their environment or remove them from an environment for their safety, we can. So, sexuality in children is not carte blanche for you to rape them, right? It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. Let's look at it that way. When we see sexuality that should not be there exhibited in teenagers or young children, it is an opportunity for us adults to be able to tune into the fact that that child is likely not safe and do what we can to get them safe and to help cultivate their minds. We also need to leave the door open for men and women to communicate so that men feel comfortable, right? Going to women and saying that they see behavior in children or they see situations that may be unsafe for children. We have to have those lines of communication open so that if a man sees something that we as women don't see, we can still be involved in helping those children. So we have to have lines of communication open. And I think the other thing we were talking about is not sexualizing our little ones, right? When we sexualize our little ones, when we dress them like adults, reward them for dancing like adults, behaving like adults, giving each other kisses, it creates an environment that allows perverts to feel comfortable because the culture is perverted. Therefore, perverts feel comfortable in the culture. And so we need to start calling that out because people need to know that we do not tolerate perversion, not soft sell perversion, not hard sell perversion. Perversion is just not tolerated. And that should be our basis. And I think the other thing we covered is getting rid of this idea of having to protect the Black image at all costs, especially when that cost is it endangers our children, right? So we shouldn't have a desire to protect family members, to protect men or women who are harming children. Their safety takes precedence over our family's image. Their safety takes precedent over our guilt. Their safety takes precedence over how people look at Black people, right? The safety of children should come before all of that. I think those are the solutions that we provided so far. Did I miss anything?
No, no, definitely the babies should be centered. Their safety. Avoiding any trauma, any of the heinous acts that comes along with molestation. Right? We want to make sure that they are, again, there's a level of inoculation from this. And again, for those people, unfortunately, who haven't had that level of protection, I do believe they need to have a safe space where they could come and they could talk and they could get the resources that are going to help them. Not only help them, but they could be proactive in helping others, and trying to prevent these things from happening to other folks. And I think a lot of times we're too silent. It's just so taboo, and we don't want to speak on it, and we don't want to speak on it, and we damn sure don't want to act on it. Um,
Oh yeah, can I want to go to what Maya said. Do you have a thought you were finishing? I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to share, and I shared this with you. So my ex-wife, we were at her uncle's funeral, and she pointed out the person that had, abused her. And I was telling to a friend, I was like, I was just out of it. I was like, I'm about to whoop his old ass, about to destroy the wedding and everything. I was just like, you know, alpha male. I'm just like, okay, he did this harm to you. Now I'm about to do some harm to him. And for her, I was just like, I wasn't in the space where I'm being supportive or nurturing or anything to her. That wasn't it. I'm like, I'm about to fuck him up. And I'm like, dang, how am I gonna do this? I'm gonna ruin their wedding and everything. And she was like, clinging on to me and trying to holding me tight and everything. I was just like, no, I don't want to do this right now. I want to do something else. And so it's just a lot of trauma associated with these. And I'm like, this person was at the wedding and he's been moving like this. And see, this is what I'm talking about. There's no way if this person is a friend of the family or anything like, there's no way this person should have even attended this wedding. Period. I don't care how old he is now. I mean, if there's suspicion that this person is moving that way, and the people that they have traumatized and harmed and injured, why would you still have them around? Just befriending them and being social with them? It just bogs my brain.
Yeah,
So
I don't understand that either. And I want to say somebody came in the chat and somebody else has mentioned it that Polite is live. I don't care. That ignorant fool rambled on about nothing, about how he wasn't going to talk about nothing. And honestly, I think he's getting off. I think he's getting off on people showing up to hear him say a whole lot of nothing. So I could care less. Y'all are welcome to go listen to him talk about nothing. And you know how disgusting it is to me to like look in his face and see how he's feeding off of this attention? Because he's so sure he's not going to be in trouble. He's really just enjoying this. And the last time he was live, his smug behavior I found disgusting. I just really did. I just found it absolutely disgusting. He started talking about his daughter being a millionaire and all this stuff that is irrelevant to what is going on. And I'm just personally not interested in hearing another self centered, off topic rant from a narcissist who just wants attention, but is not really trying to address anything. He already told y'all he's not about to tell you anything. He already said he's not going to comment on the situation. So at this point, he's only going live for attention, which is disgusting to me. And it says a lot about his character, whether he's guilty or not. That's what I think. But we know that everybody's going to play and replay and analyze him saying a whole lot of freaking nothing all day tomorrow, or tonight, tomorrow. Everybody's going to be doing it. So I personally could care less. I really don't care. He didn't say anything the last two times he opened up his mouth to speak. Freaking idiot talking about what money his daughter has and he can't be canceled. Like that made me want to slap him, whether he was guilty or innocent. That behavior was just disgusting. Really? This is what's on the table? A child inebriated with your semen all over her, and you want to come talk about how you can't be canceled? Absolutely not. I will not be going over there to watch anything he's talking about. You've got me twisted. I don't even know why you came to share. Absolutely not. He's not saying anything relevant. That's what I heard from the last time he talked. He's self-centered and he had nothing relevant to say. And whether he's guilty or not, the very least, he showed his character. At the very least, we know his character is sideways. So that's what I have to say about that. Maya said we also shouldn't be allowing children to listen to sexually explicit artists either. We shouldn't let them emulate those people. That is true because honestly, people who groom children, what a lot of parents don't realize is you are doing the grooming for the groomer. Okay? These freaks, these hebophiles, these pedophiles, these ebophiles, they don't need to groom your kids anymore because you are grooming your own children. You are grooming them by showing them sexually explicit music videos. You're grooming them by the programming you let them watch. You're grooming them with their clothing, right? You're grooming them by forcing them to go hug Uncle so-and-so or Grandma so-and-so when they don't want to. You are desensitizing your children. People who really abuse children, that is their first step, is to expose the children, right? Little by little, expose them to more and more vulgar things. Why? So that they're familiar with it when it comes time for them to do it. Right? So that they're familiar with the concepts of dancing sexy. So they're familiar with the concepts of men and women kissing. So they're familiar with sexual concepts. They do that so that when they act on their desire, the child is already acclimated to being used to those imagery. They know what's about to happen. In their minds, that's a possibility that can occur. So y'all don't be out here grooming your children for the freaks. A
But it
lot of guys
also
think
does
this is cute, but you're just really helping them out. Like you take care of the first two stages of child molestation for them as parents.
but it also does what we talked about earlier, we spoke about earlier, and that it robs away the innocent from our babies. And so these types of exposures, right, to whether it's music, certain programming, the internet, whatever it may be, this again, when they're exposed to these things, they start acting a certain way. Again, their innocence decreases, and that's unfortunate because people don't view them as an innocent young child anymore. They view them as a mature adult, even though they're still children. And these are the things that are unfortunate because they have consequences. I mean, they shouldn't. I mean, our babies should have a safety net within the community. If they do something, if they act a certain way, um, there should be a safety net to say, hey, we have you. That's not the right way to go. Here's the right direction to go. But unfortunately, there's not many safety nets within our community. There's people who are preying upon our babies in our community. And that's something we need to do something about.
Yeah. And Herc said also protect children from the sexual abuse of other children,
Absolutely.
prevent the spread of sexual. This is so true. Like, I don't like, first of all, my kids aren't doing sleepovers or anything, but when I have children in the home, I need to be able to enter the room. If we have children who are not part of our immediate family, like children I personally birthed, then I need doors open. I need you guys where I can see you because you never know what a child has been exposed to. And children do hurt children. And so we need to be looking out for that as well. We need to protect children from each other because children can groom and abuse each other. But we also need to be watching out for signs that a child has those tendencies because, again, when we focus on the behavior of children, it should be for their protection, not so we can call them Jezebels, not so we can call them evil, not so we can say that they're getting the goods early in the case of boys, because, boys can never actually be victims. But we need to be seeing these behaviors and look at them as opportunities for us to protect. When
You
we see
know,
children moving funny, it's an indication that something is wrong. And that should red flag any responsible adult.
this is such a great point because, oftentimes, we're talking about the older folks, but a lot of times it's older children or children, their peers, right? Who have these unfortunate proclivities of these types of, just these horrible actions and just, I mean, yeah, it's just horrible. But it does happen a lot within children. You know what I mean? Within peers, and that's something we just have to be cognizant of. Who our baby's friends are. Their parents and everything. And like Irene alluded to, like, oh, if we don't know them like that, we need to make sure we're watching them and the way they move because we don't know what they've been exposed to. And things they've been exposed to, they may try to act out on other children, and it's unfortunate because we see these things happen, you know, all too often.
Yeah, Awesome Auntie asked a really great question, which I think we ought to talk about, which are what are some of the signs that we can look for that harm is coming to a child? Um, so the first thing I always red flag right away is adult behavior, right? We've talked about like sexual things that seem sexual in a child, age inappropriate sexuality, and I think this is hard. And here's the thing too. For me, it's also exposure. So, for example, if I see a child, like a little girl, who is engaging in like of a lot of adult female movements, like this is a big one for me, hands on the hips, you know what I mean? Or like twisting her body for a picture the way that an adult woman would do. Now, these may not be signs that a child is being abused, but this is sign of exposure. And as an older woman, I would go to that child's mother and I would point that out, right? Or I might, if that child is in my care, say, sweetie, take your hands off your hips, or we don't stand like that, right? Things like that. Um, that's a small sign because there's many reasons a child may act that way, but then there are more egregious signs. Like, I knew a little girl who ran up and she was very fond on jumping on the laps of men, right? And literally she jumped on the lap of a member of my family because the little girl really did this, and he just threw his hands up and he is like, I am not touching her. And the ladies had to come over and get her, and then we had to go to her mother, and that had to be a whole conversation to ensure that we were doing the things and letting her know, like, we are watching and something is wrong here. The way that she's approaching the men, the way that she's behaving, this is not appropriate behavior. What's going on your side? And we did get to the bottom of it, but that was a sign for me there. Can you think of we can go back and forth. Can you think of any signs yourself that a child may be being abused? I know excessive fondling of themselves, um, or fear that you might touch them, right?
Yes.
Um,
You know, so, wetting the bed, um, like you said, the trepidation of, you know, adults, right? Flinching, you know, with certain types of actions. Um,
a change in their behavior, like if they
definitely.
seem withdrawn, just
Yeah.
any drastic change in their behavior, that we have to look out for that. Just be keeping a close eye on your little ones, them not wanting to be with certain people or go certain places. I know I had an incident with my eldest, and this is why I stopped sending my children to daycare. My eldest child, who you guys know is like 26, and he was the only child I ever tried to put in daycare. And the daycare I took him to was a nice daycare and everything. But every time he even saw the building, like let's say if we just drove by the building, we weren't even going there, he would get so upset. He was in that daycare probably a little bit over a week because I was like, why is he getting upset? He was too little to talk. And so one day I just snuck in the daycare. I just unannounced. And the lady was hitting the kids with one of those wooden rulers with the metal edge. And I never sent a child to daycare after that. Right? I never did. I know of another daycare where they were doing the tasting game with the kids. They were spraying water in their mouths, the tasting game, but it was like, oh, it's a hot day, we're spraying water in their mouths. So,
Um,
but the thing is, I noticed the change in his behavior. I noticed that he had trepidation about going to that place, or a desire to not be around certain people, even if it's something small, because every child's not going to throw a full blown tantrum. Some children just might recoil a little bit. We have to be paying attention for those micro reactions.
yes, and like I said, their bowel move. I mean, urinate. I mean, if they're having accidents and everything, or certain parts of their body sensitive. I mean, these are obvious ones, right?
Yeah.
But like the mood swings, those are ones that are a little bit more subtle. Um,
Or they don't want to go home. That's
yeah,
a really big one. Like if they never want to go home, they always want to stay, they want to stay.
stay at
Now that
school.
could be that they're having fun at your house, but sometimes it's because they are, especially that insistence,
Babe,
right?
put Joe. I don't know how to pronounce her name, Joja, because we want to make sure this person is not. I hate myself because I was
Oh
raped.
no, that's terrible.
That
I hate myself because I was raped by two men in my family, and I did try things with guys who were friends of the family. One of them is gay now, and I think it's because of me. Although I wasn't outwardly sexual, it's weird. Actually, that's not weird because an aversion to outward sexuality is often a sign of abuse. It's not weird. And you certainly didn't make anybody gay, but I am so sorry that that happened to you. And I just have to say, like, and you guys know I've talked about like my childhood traumas a little bit with you guys privately. Just know that that does not have to define you, but that can
absolutely
help
not.
you help a lot of people. Yeah.
Absolutely not. I just want to acknowledge her, and I know it's hopefully it's cathartic, but don't blame yourself. And a lot of survivors do when they've been taken advantage of and had other incidents occur. And no, don't blame yourself, sister. That's not it.
Let's see if a child is hurting themselves.
Yeah,
That's something to look for. The head banging. So some real easy signs are like they might head bang, they may
cut,
pick at part of their bodies, have
cutting,
nervousness like that.
cutting. That, those,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, things like that. I think with the little ones, they might pick at themselves a little bit. They might have nervous habits or they might bang their heads. That's really common in children that are being abused. If they're extremely rebellious, violent, if they're extremely defiant, that's often a sign of negligence or abuse. These are things that we should be looking out for. But after we look out for them, I want to talk about we have to start being comfortable approaching people. Like we might see something, and a lot of us see something, and we're concerned and we recognize something is wrong, but we never take that additional step, right? We have to start to take the additional step of doing something. We have to do something. It's not enough for us to notice it if we're not going to do anything. And I think we have become experts at noticing things but doing nothing.
That's absolutely right. And that's why I'm like, with this conversation again, I know the title, probably lured a lot of people in because they thought it was going to be a drag fest and everything. But definitely we spoke about accountability on, a multiplicity of adults' parts and everything, and that still holds true. But again, we want to talk about what can we actually do? What can be done? And I think one of the things I said earlier, and I appreciate Irene for supporting this comment, being that she's a sister, is that when brothers are seeing things, I mean, we have to be hand in glove. This can't become this time where we're this bifurcation where brothers are just, oh, well, don't tell my these young sisters what to do and this and that and everything. Really, that's not the time. And again, you have to know the other brother and the individual. They're not moving in a certain way, and the same thing holds true to our sisters. Like, we have to support one another to support our babies, our community. I mean, it's really just that simple. I mean, it's maybe difficult to execute because we have so many camps, right? Where brothers like, no, I can't trust these sisters and everything, and sisters like, no, I can't trust these brothers. But listen, we're gonna have to trust each other to a degree if we want to save our babies. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it.
Yeah, I think it has to be a joint effort. I do think it's really important, and I've said this since this situation started. It's going to be really important for the men to step up. And again, if you don't want to be judge and jury on Polite, I don't care, don't do it. But that's not the thing. You have to step up and speak against this behavior, though. That regardless, no child should be drunk. We shouldn't be finding semen on children. We shouldn't be harming children. Brothers need to come forward and say it is inappropriate for people to be out here talking about whether or not a child can be sexual. That has nothing to do with you touching them. All the things the women are saying, all the things you hear the women saying with passion, the men need to start saying it. That's going to go a long way to building trust. Because right now, the women are looking at this situation and they are looking at their lives and the lives of people that they know and love, and it is sounding familiar. What happened to this girl is bringing up that in women. And so, for us to really, this is an opportunity for growth if the men step forward and they start to show that they agree with the women that these acts are egregious, are are not okay, and that there can and will be consequences and that the men are ready to implement those consequences. I mean, that has to come through. And all of the soft selling, all of the conversations around child sexuality and what the kids are doing, all of the conversations about how men should protect themselves, all this stuff is counterproductive because the only conversation and dialogue that should be coming out of this situation is that the Black community has tolerated this sort of behavior for too long, and we need to get together and we need to figure out how to make this stop, how to make these people feel very uncomfortable around Black people. The Black community should be known far and wide that we will string you up. So take your tendencies elsewhere. Because if you touch one of ours, that will be the last thing you do on this earth, right? Our community, let our community be known for that. Let our community be known for the people that protect their children at all costs. Let our community be known for the community that you don't even want to bother trying to go over there and touch those little black kids because these black people are crazy out here, right? They will kill you over a kid. Let our community be known for that. And I think that should be the conversation that is coming out of all of this. All that I'm hearing on the internet right now, this is not, these conversations are exactly why this is a problem. These conversations are exactly why anybody would think that they could return a drunk, swollen child and get away with it. It's because of the dialogue that is surrounding this situation. This is bigger than Polight. This is an issue that is really bringing home a problem in our community. Um, do you have? We should probably get out of here, y'all. But we can talk about this again. But what are your final thoughts? Unless you have something else you wanted us to cover.
You know, the central thing I wanted to cover was again centering the our babies. I mean, that's it. I've said it, repetitively, and that's the thing where it is. I mean, you could talk about the allegations, you could talk about, Polight, you could talk about the mom, you talk about the dad, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, this child, this young sister, is the victim here. And I don't think enough attention has been focused on her and what can we do to make sure she gets the support and resources that she needs and that we could prevent this from happening again. And again, there's so many, I've been looking at the chat, there's so many people who have been, sharing, their, experiences and their survivor experiences. And again, these type of things are, like I said, they're cathartic and people need these spaces. They need to know that people are, it's not their fault. I mean, it wasn't them, not to blame themselves. You know, they just need to know these things. And, it's so much bigger than what the conversation is about, like you alluded to. But, it's unfortunate that we don't value the things that we should be valuing. We value the gossip. We value, you know, the hating on sisters or the hating on brothers, or the hating on. I'm like, but we don't value the love and the protection of anyone enough. And again, I know that's not the people in the chat and everything. They're all on board and making sure we're doing something proactive. And I just want the focus to be there. So we have this incident. Okay, how are we going to utilize this to help make sure it doesn't happen again? Again, brothers, do we have to go out and say, okay, listen, Dr. Umar says, we're going to put ski masks on and everything, black ski masks, and have to go see some brothers. I mean, if we have to do that, back in the day, the Panthers were called to handle situations, So do we have to have, a cadre of brothers, nationwide when these type of things happen where we just deal with these situations? We're the judge, jury, and executioner. Again, we have to find out.
But I mean, also, let's be clear, you don't even need that because the minute I go back to the little Bootsy effect, right? Where a man is in a room with other men openly admitting, right? He's openly admitting that he had some kids raped. You don't need the black police for that. You can yoke him on site. You're in the room with him. When the man comes around with his 16-year-old girlfriend, you can snatch him on site. Like a lot of this stuff can be done on site. The moment you catch somebody, look, you will get off. Say, I saw that man bathing a little girl. He had no business having this child in the tub, and I lost my mind and I took a vase and I hit him over the head with it. Like, I'm just saying, like, a lot of this stuff can be handled on site. We know that we catch people red handed all the time. We know somebody can be punched in the face on site when they're hanging out at the middle school too much, hanging out at the high school. Brother, you don't have a kid. I've seen you here too many times, right? We know off top, like, some woman, my son was walking down the street. She was talking about she gave him her number because she thought he would make a good model. But little did she know, he came, gave me the number, I called, and we never heard from that woman. Now, when we see stuff like that, we can yoke them on site. We don't have to wait for the coalition. The coalition is for people we don't catch on site. When you see them in the moment, you can fix them in the moment. And I think that should be the attitude we have. We want to go home. We want to talk about it. We want to call cousin so and so, auntie so and so, our sister, tell them what happened. Oh my gosh, isn't this egregious? We want to do all that. Meanwhile, this person has walked, left, off, gone, lived their whole life after they've been caught red handed. So some of this stuff needs to be handled in the moment. We have to start to address these things when they occur, not down the road, not after somebody's got comfortable in their foolery, not so they can leave your house, go to the next house, and do the same thing with the other kid while you figure out what you're going to do, right? We have to start handling these things in the moment, in the actual moment. Speaking about Polight, fine. We want to say we don't know what he did or didn't do with this girl, but what we do know is that one of the women that he is with, that he got with her at the age of 16 on site, he should have never made it to this situation. He should have never made it to this situation. I want to know when all the people saw him with the 16-year-old, why that wasn't corrected back then. Maybe we wouldn't even be here today if back when he was flexing with a 16-year-old, somebody would have dealt with it back then. You know what I'm saying? A lot of this stuff is our fault because we let things go too far. We see people moving funny and we just are cool with it. Or maybe that's it. Maybe we just have a lot of degenerates and freaks in our community, and that's really what it is. We aren't correcting each other because really we're down with the sip. We're down with the ish. You know what I mean? Like I'm not sure.
I don't know if we're all down with the debauchery. I'm not going to say that, but too many of us are. You know, and as I was listening to you, I was thinking about one time a friend and I we went down to Mexico and we went to an adult venue that he took me to because, of course, you know, I don't know anything about that. Um, but he took me and it was cool. Went there. I don't really like those. I don't really like strip clubs. I love women, but I'm like, okay, I don't know who you've been with and everything. So that's never been my thing. But I'll say this: once we left and we were going back to across the border, I, this is no exaggeration. So we saw the prostitutes, and they were like all in one huge line, and their age just started to descend, and it was crazy because I was looking at and I was teaching high school at the time or middle school, and I was like, this girl looks like one of my students, and I just couldn't imagine how people could have a proclivity towards these young adolescent looking girls. I mean, it just it freaked me out just seeing it there. And the irony is that a lot of them were right in front of the police stations, and I was just like, this is crazy. And so now we know with the trafficking and everything, we know that there's some real sick individuals that are doing things with 7 years. I mean, it's just really it's just really warped how these type of things could come. But I saw it years ago. I'm like, oh, I never put it together. Like people, they're out here, and people would actually gravitate toward them. But
Yeah, that's the passport gang who were up in here earlier trying to represent the passport gang, who pride themselves on their ability to get a passport and travel to countries and have access, to young people. I mean, that's like a whole other conversation. I can't believe the passport gang had the audacity to come up in here and try to advertise. That just irritates me. I don't even want to think about that because
no,
that's
those
like a whole sector of freaks unto themselves.
it's I mean, this was years ago, but I'm like, this is crazy. And now, obviously, things are done a lot differently, with the internet and with the trafficking and everything. But to see, yeah, that's no, yeah, it's just unfortunate because a lot of these survivors, especially the younger ones, and I think somebody said this earlier, and it's so true. Because I know there's a little spot back where in the Bay Area where they're taking advantage of these young sisters who have low self-esteem, Some of them have IEPs and things like that, and they've been a victim of molestation and everything, and they set them out there. You know what I mean? They're thinking, oh, this is what you're good at, and so it's just it could be a downhill spiral if we don't get in front of this situation.
And it's
Because
really on the parents because you can't take advantage of a child if their parent is active. It's just not possible. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to really own this as
yeah,
parents.
yes,
If this is happening to our kids, this is your fault. If anybody's getting that close to your kids and you don't know about it, this is your fault. If you didn't flag this, this is your fault. These things are our fault as adults and we must correct them. They absolutely positively have to be corrected.
yeah, and I just hope that we all could be part of the solution instead of just saying these things and coming for each other and just saying, "Hey, all right, let's act." Not now, but right now. So that's it for me.
Yeah, for me, I just want to reiterate everything that's been said during this live. Like, number one, I don't care how sexual a child is, pointing out that children can be sexual, that children can be violent, that children can do anything has nothing to do with whether or not they are accountable when an adult rapes them. Okay? Their consent, them showing, like I said, I don't care if a child shows up naked at your doorstep. It is irrelevant to anything. I don't know why people are bringing this up. I don't know why people are talking about the Jezebel spirit in kids. I don't know, other than to say that only a freak thinks like that, because that point is irrelevant. The only reason we would even bring that up is to talk about the fact that adults should look out for children like that so that we can help them, so that we can try to protect them, so that we can figure out what's going on with them and what the adults around them are doing to cause them to behave that way. If that is not the conversation, I'm going to need people to stop bringing up what kids can do. Okay, let's not bring that up because that has nothing to do with the actions that an adult takes. Children do not run this thing. Okay, children do not dictate our behavior. We dictate things for children, not vice versa. The second thing is I understand the men wanting to talk about how this situation relates to men protecting themselves from being in situations where they can be falsely accused or even compromised, but now is not the time for that discussion. You guys need to be discussing that 364 days a year, but not today. And I just think, like Mr. was saying, it seems very much like a deflecting tactic when the topic on the table is child protection and abuse of a child and you want to talk about how men can be protected. It's just not the time. Now is not the time. There's a time and a place, and this is not the time nor the place. The other thing we talked about was, what else did we talk about?
We talked about protecting the provocative child. Um, yeah, I think that's it. Um,
We
now,
talked more than about two things, didn't we?
no, so provocative children. We talk, and that's this is the first time I've heard
Okay,
of.
let me look at the list. Hold on.
I mean, you said it. I should have said it,
I
but
said but I didn't. I only mentioned two things. What was the third thing?
as for protection of children, we were talking about that ad nauseum, and what can we learn from this and next steps?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And because you just talked about the vulnerability of black men,
Okay.
so
So yeah, so I guess that was it. Yeah. So those are the things that we covered. And I think we also covered, because somebody in the chat brought it up, what are the signs? How do we tell that children are being abused? And then also the need for us to take action. Like it's not enough to recognize something is wrong if you don't do anything about it. And that action should happen immediately and not some time down the road after you've discussed it with 15 people or generations have passed.
this
So
is
I
the
guess,
first time,
go ahead. I'm
this
sorry.
is the first time I've heard of this as pertaining to a child. This Jezebel spirit thing. This is the first time I've heard of
And
it.
a woman did that.
I mean,
I couldn't
that's kind
believe
of
that mess. I was like, did this broad just say the Jezebel spirit?
this is kind of. And again, so I get what she's saying, but again, we're the adults. I mean, men, we have the power and everything. Like I said, it's been plenty of examples where little girls try to be flirtatious and everything. I'm like, cut that. Like, listen, talk to her, or when I was married or previously married, or I would have her talk to another female colleague. Yeah, like this is not the way to move. And you have to deal with those things immediately because
But it's just stupid to bring that up in a case that's talking about child rape. Like, what in the world does a Jezebel spirit or a funny moving kid have
you
to do with you touching them? It doesn't, nothing.
know.
And there's no point in bringing that up. There's no point in the context of this conversation for any woman or man to start talking about children being acting sexy. What is your point? That's my question. Look, here's the thing. What is the point? What is the point of talking about a child acting sexy? What are you trying to say? What are you really trying to say? Is what I want to know, because that sneaky slide crap is not going to slide. Like I said, I don't care if a child lays down butt naked and begs for it. That has jack crap to do with anything. I don't understand your point. If anything but your heart breaks for a child that's behaving that way, then I don't understand your point. Are you bringing it up so you could talk about how that's hurtful and painful and we should really love and care for and try to protect these children? Are you bringing that up to say that a man can be entrapped by a child? That a man could just be put in a position where he just can't say no, it's just terrible, blah 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 blah. Like
But as a
I
brother,
don't see I don't see the
that's
relevance of
that's
bringing it up
crazy.
in this context. Like I said, there's a time and a place, and the only context I would ever accept somebody talking about a child being sexual toward an adult would be to tell adults that is a red flag and an opportunity for you to help that child because somebody clearly is hurting that child. Otherwise, I don't want to hear adults talking about it. Like, I don't want to hear any adult bringing up children being sexual unless it is in the context of trying to help them. Otherwise, y'all are playing games out here. Like, I
But
just, oh my
here's
God.
the thing for the brothers and everything. I mean, brothers aren't that weak where we're just going to succumb to, like, we just want to screw everything, even, young minors and everything when they come on to us. I mean, we have grown ass women coming on to us and we turn them down, so I mean,
No, babe, no, you haven't heard these people. They're out here talking about these girls look like adults. They don't even know they're kids, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, all these excuses, you got all the excuses in the world, but no sense. Look, if you can't tell that somebody is an adult, then you don't need to be sleeping with them. Let me put it, if you have to sit and ask yourself, how old is this person? If you need to ask them for their age, then maybe you're doing something wrong. Okay. Maybe that's somebody that you don't need to be with. Maybe it's a sign. Maybe it is a sign. If you cannot tell that this person is your age, then maybe it is a sign that you are dipping into a pool of perversion. That is how I feel. I don't want to hear anything about here. Anything. Look, I had this endowment when I was like 12. But I promise you, I don't look 12 now, and I looked 12 then. I look like a child going through puberty. That's what I look like. So I don't think this idea that, this is like the onus of, how, women develop into women, how during this pubescent stage you have girls that are developing into women and acting like, a woman's developmental stages are irrelevant, and you just cannot tell. You just can't tell. We all know a kid when we see one. I'm gonna need y'all to stop playing. And if you don't know a kid when you see one, then you need to not date anybody under the age of 30, because clearly you are not a safe person. Anybody who can't discern a child from an adult, look, that's a whole nother conversation. Because honestly, I have strong feelings about people who say they can't tell a child from an adult. Why would you even want to be with somebody if you can't tell they're not a kid?
yeah, that's just your proclivity towards that type of debauchery. You're just into that. But let's not make excuses for it because there's no excuses for it. Like I said, I don't. the Jezebel spirit for minors, for little girls, everything. We have some fast ass little girls, absolutely, but that doesn't mean we have to, get down with them. That no, that's like I said, that we don't. Yeah, of course we know some brothers look out for, they prey on these young sisters. I mean, where I'm from in Southern California, a Navy town, they used to always come by in their cars and everything, looking at the young girls and everything. And we used to get mad at them because, like, listen, y'all some grown ass men. You know what I mean? Of course, y'all got money. Y'all in the military and everything, and, we still in high school and y'all come around. I mean, and it's probably things that have happened with other people too. We have, older guys coming around flaunting material items and everything as a way and means to attract, these young sisters. Again, it's been happening for a while. Doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do, but we just need to take a stand and do something about it because it's not okay, and it seems like it's getting worse.
Well, with that said, we're going to get out of here.
Yeah. Thank
Mhm.
y'all.
We'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Peace.